So in this video, I'm going to talk about how it actually feels to speak Russian on a day-to-day basis, and I'm going to provide some tips with how you can make that feel a little bit less daunting, and also how to cope with it and develop a positive mindset around it. Hi, my name is Matt. I run a 5-month online program called Step with Confidence. It is designed for Russian study students who are about to go on their year abroad. I prepare you linguistically, culturally, and mentally for your year abroad. If that sounds like something that interests you, you can check the link in my bio, my Instagram page, or my YouTube channel. Something that's often not spoken enough between tutors and students is the mental load that speaking Russian on a daily basis when you go abroad will have on you. And of course, when you study Russian, even if you study it every day, that's great. But when it comes to speaking it every single day and racking your brain of all of the skills that you've acquired every single day, it can definitely take its toll. When you first arrive abroad, whether that be in Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or Estonia, the first day or the first few days can sometimes feel incredibly overwhelming. It's when your studies finally start to come to life. Things like your vocab lists, your grammar tables, and your audio drills, they start to take shape around you and they start to come to life. And it can be highly motivating to see the fruits of your labor, but it can also be really daunting to realize, wow, I have done all that work and there's still so much that I don't know. So, yes, it can be a bit daunting, but what becomes even more daunting is when you realize after a few days, oh my gosh, there is no break. I cannot just take a day off where I don't speak any Russian. At the same time, though, it's completely unrealistic to expect yourself to never speak in English the entire time that you're abroad, or to never speak in a language that makes you feel comfortable. And you will encounter a lot of moments when you feel uncomfortable in your usage of Russian, or in the social interactions that you might be having, especially if you feel underprepared now. As someone who's been there and done it, I can definitely say that it's important to be realistic with yourself. Yes, we need to push ourselves, we need to exercise that Russian speaking muscle as much as we can without burning out. It is unrealistic to expect that you will never speak English when you're there. And so I would say be intentional with your use of English rather than accidental and getting into some not so good cycles. For example, have a dedicated day or set of days per week where you catch up with your parents or catch up with your friends, or maybe you meet up with a group where you speak English. However, the reason I say you should be intentional about this is because if you don't want to be honest with yourself about it, you won't just end up speaking English every day, you will end up slipping into it and feeling guilty every time you do it. However, if you're intentional about speaking in a language that you may feel more comfortable than Russian, then it's important to schedule it in so that you don't have to feel guilty about it because it was planned all along. Simultaneously, it lets you have a break from speaking Russian, and then it also makes you feel well rested enough to then go and speak Russian to the general public and wider community. Just like going to the gym and building muscle and being consistent with it, it's important that this is what you do with Russian too. However, just like with going to the gym too much and not letting yourself have a rest, you can get lactic acid buildup. We don't want Russian lactic acid or linguistic lactic acid building up. So it's important to schedule in moments where you're going to linguistically rest. And I think it's really important to understand the difference between slipping into English, this isn't good, and this is when I'm going to speak English, this is controlled, then I'm going to go back and carry on with my Russian. Another way that I advise students to help find this balance is through joining something local that can help them socially integrate. This doesn't even need to be something that gets you speaking Russian all the time. It could be something like helping a local group with their English or another language. It could be providing some cultural exchanges with them. However, it could also just be something where you work with your hands in a more voluntary sense. For example, working with endangered animals, maybe working with children, provided that you can have the legal documentation for it, etc. And also, what this does is it gives you an extra sense of purpose. So you're not just there for the sake of learning Russian, you're also given this other reason to wake up in the morning and a reason to have a smile on your face when you go to sleep. So, not just having moments where you know you're going to speak English, but having moments where you can look forward to integrating or interacting with locals outside of the classroom. Because life is incredibly boring if you just stay at home, study, stay at home, study. Not to mention, it lets you give back to the community. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and even Estonia, are not rich countries. We want to show these places that we are open to working with them, and they would like to show you that they are open to working with you as well. So, definitely, the more that you put in, the more that you get out. Another aspect I would like to talk about is something called verbal hygiene, and it's the idea of which language should I speak in and is it appropriate to speak in it? Depending on the country that you spend your year abroad in, this can surface in different ways. For example, in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, it's highly unlikely that you're going to really have a problem of wondering whether it's appropriate to speak in Russian or not. In Astana, you may have to learn a little bit of basic Kazakh and then you can switch to Russian. And in Estonia, you're going to be faced with this a lot. The idea of, is it appropriate to speak Russian? Do I need to scan the room to make sure that it's fine to do? And as I was saying earlier, this can all really take a toll. And even though it is important to stay informed and to stay appropriate and verbally hygienic, it's also quite tricky to deal with and grapple with all the time. In general, locals are going to be extremely grateful that you're even speaking to them in Russian because you are someone who is showing an active interest in their country and culture. And for a lot of people, Russian is still a lingua franca, if not a native language. However, what I will say is that there does become a terminating point when your Russian becomes so good that the novelty of, wow, you speak Russian, slowly drifts away and it starts to be replaced right with, okay, you now speak Russian. When are you going to learn Estonian? Or when are you going to learn Kazakh? Or when are you going to learn Kyrgyz? And of course, that's not really why we are in this country. Sure, I definitely encourage it, but we do Russian studies degrees because post Soviet studies degrees don't really exist yet. The thing is, your hierarchy of needs is screaming, get your Russian perfect, get your Russian good. You're going back to uni and you need really good Russian. Any time spent learning Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Estonian, whatever, is going to be wasted. Of course, it's not true that you're going to be wasting your time getting your Kazakh or Kyrgyz or whatever up to scratch. But it's also important that you have good enough Russian to take back with you to your uni. But it's even more so doable if you arrive with a solid foundation of Russian to begin with. A lot of people have this sort of panic mode when they realize they need their Russian to be good, therefore, we're just going to focus on Russian and not learn any of the other languages. Because, yeah, if you don't even have your Russian knowledge that's good enough to be used, then you're going to focus on that first. However, if you arrive on your year abroad with a decent enough level of Russian already, that allows you to function, to be independent, you can then go on to develop your Russian to a more advanced state, and you will have the confidence and that mind space to be able to pick up a new language, even if you pick that new language up and just keep it at a basic level. The key is we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for perfection in your Russian, and we're definitely not expecting perfection in your Kazakh. I definitely don't have perfect Kazakh. The best mindset to have is my Russian is okay. Now my Russian is good, I'm happy with it. I'm going to keep developing it on the side, and I'm going to start learning maybe Kazakh or Kyrgyz or Armenian or something like this, so that it can open even more doors for me. It's not a sense of I don't want to offend people, it's a sense of I want to explore more. And once you internalize this and realize that the perfection's holding you back, and that yes, you can make some mistakes here and there, but people will still really respect you for what you have, again, it gives you more of a sense of purpose to even be on your year abroad. And not to mention, it can give you even more skills and resources for your dissertation or projects. I want to quickly conclude this point by saying that there are definitely countries where speaking Russian is still fine. It's not like this mental load is there 24/7. In Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, you are so fine speaking Russian in 99.9% of occasions. In Latvia and Lithuania, it's a very different story, and you do need to be really careful with it and practice caution. So it's best to stay informed, speak with former students that have studied in the region, or speak to professionals like myself who can advise you on what is best. And obviously, times change, so also speak to locals and ask, "Могу ли я с вами говорить по-русски?" It's appropriate, it's non-imposing, and it will ironically produce better results than just speaking in Russian straight away and imposing it on them. The final thing I want to talk about is the fact that progress is actually happening, but slowly and at an unnoticeable rate. And this is the problem. Our generation, we expect things to happen quickly. We expect language learning to be a bit like making a stir fry. We expect that we do a few actions and in less than 10 minutes, we've got it ready. The problem is, with learning any language, especially a grammatically complex language like Russian, it's not making a quick stir fry. It's making a stew, something that is really, really slow. And the slower and the more time you spend on it, the better the result will be. If I told you, here is a stew, I made the whole thing in 10 minutes, you'd probably think, I don't want to do that. I don't want to eat that. The meat is probably raw, the vegetables are probably hard, the liquid itself is probably still water. Why would I eat a 10-minute stew? And it's the same with Russian. No one's actually going to believe you if you say, I learned Russian in 2 months and I'm now fluent. No, it's not true. And you should never expect that of yourself either, that within 2, 3 months your Russian's going to go from, A1 to C2. It just doesn't happen. Language learning, especially for languages like Russian, take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and so much patience. And I try to teach my students all of this, these values with language learning. Patience, putting in effort even when it's hard, and accepting that we're not always going to be perfect, but that is okay. I've been studying Russian for over 6 years, and I teach the language, and even I still make the occasional slip up, and there are times where I realize, wow, I still haven't learned that word. And that isn't my fault. That doesn't mean I'm bad at the language, just like how you guys are not bad at the language either. It just means, okay, I've not been exposed to this before, now I need to learn it. Slowly but surely, the progress is ticking, and the most important advice I have for you is to trust the process. There is a reason why almost all universities mandate a year abroad, and even though I think it can be a bit problematic in today's day, there is definitely a point in it, and that is that the year abroad is the only true time in your degree, apart from taking step with confidence, where you feel daily progress. And even if you don't feel it on the inside, it's happening in the background, so that at the end of your year abroad, you should realize that, wow, I have made decent progress since when I started. And remember, you have fourth year as well. So it's not like all of your learning happens in third year. You've got your final year too to get those last bits in and to fill in the holes so that you can finally take those end of year exams and graduate with a great grade. So in this video, I've spoken about three things. I've spoken about the mental load of just speaking Russian in general and feeling guilty when you're not speaking it. I've spoken about language appropriateness, knowing culturally whether it's appropriate to use Russian or not. And I've also spoken about the process itself and developing these healthier mindsets about how quickly it takes to learn Russian. If you feel like implementing these isn't going to be that doable, or if you're thinking, wow, this sounds like something I would really like, or if you just like the way that I communicate, then do check out the course, Step with Confidence. As I say, it is a 5-month course. It's not a crash course. In it, we develop healthy study habits for Russian. We develop your linguistic abilities so that you get to Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or another destination with functional Russian, so you're already an independent user. And we also develop your cultural understanding so that you know when it's appropriate to act in a certain way or say certain things. Keep following for more content, and I look forward to you in the next one. Но до следующего видео. До свидания.